welcome to my podcast. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking to Melanie Heaney, an Olympic and World Championship figure skating photographer. We're going to find out what it's like to be a figure skating photographer. So sit back, grab a mug of your favorite beverage, and welcome to this episode of On the Ice with Bernice. Well, hello there, Melanie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Bernice?
I am as fit and good as ever. I'm just so excited to be able to talk to you today because I know that you've just done some very exciting and I think amazing things in the figure skating world. And you're part of the figure skating world, even though you don't skate. And I just think that's cool. And I'm really excited to talk to you to show people that you can be involved in the skating world without being a skater. So so I want to just start off with, can you just tell us what you do at the moment? Just what is your, I guess, job description?
Sure. I have my own photography business, Melanie Heaney Photography. I probably 70 to 70% of what I do is going to figure skating competitions around the US, mostly at the more local level, although I do some regional and sectional and national events as well. And I photograph everyone who skates, long days, typically 12 to sometimes 15 or 16 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then my husband runs a sales table, usually out in the lobby, and skaters and their families and their parents can come and look at their photos after they're done skating and purchase them if they want. So I do that probably about 20 events a year.
Oh, wow.
And then I also love figure skating. I love following the sport. I love being able to photograph the high level skaters. So I also work for a few different media organizations as a freelancer, and I photograph international, national, elite level events. I probably do 3 to 5 of those type of events per year, just kind of depending on my schedule. I'm pretty busy with the smaller competitions, and then where they are. We try in the pre-pandemic days, I would try to pick about one a year that was in a country or city that I hadn't been to yet. And then a lot of times my husband would either tag along for the whole event or meet me at the end. And then we'd have a little vacation as well. So
that just sounds so fun. And I guess you travel around. So tell us about a place that, was just really exciting that you'd never been before and you got to photograph the competition, but then you got to go explore the city. What's a fascinating city you've been to?
Well, I love photographing. I love France. I went, my mom's a French teacher, or she was. So I had been before as a child and teenager with her. And I was really excited in 2016, I think, to photograph my first major event in France. I went to the Grand Prix final in Marseille. And it was my husband's first time in France. So I think for that one, I think we did our vacationing before the event, which is a lot better when I can plan it that way because there's a lot of work editing and stuff after the event is over. So we flew into Paris. We did the typical Parisian things. We ate great food, and then went to the Loire Valley. We saw some chateaus. I think we did a wine we did like a wine tasting. I don't think we went to a winery, but we did a wine tasting, and then we drove all the way to Marseille, which is on the southern coast of France, and then did the event there and got to do some touristy things in Marseille as well. And I had never been to Marseille. So that was really exciting to be able to see some new things, even though I spent the beginning of the trip kind of showing my husband a lot of the places that we'd already been to, or I'd already been to.
So what's it like driving in France? That sounds
oh my gosh,
crazy.
Expensive. So we didn't, I wouldn't recommend it. We did the, we rented a car because I thought it would be cheaper than the train, because we kind of planned it last minute and the train tickets were very expensive. And usually train travel in Europe is fairly inexpensive. And so I think I was just kind of put off by the high prices. And I was like, oh, let's just drive. It was way further than I expected.
Oh,
and
wow.
The tolls were incredibly expensive. So it ended up being just as much money as taking the train, and it took 3 times as long. So, because France has high-speed trains, which
right.
are amazing. You can get all the way across the country in just a few hours. So, yeah, that was probably the least. And the central France is not super exciting. It's a lot more remote than you kind of imagine France to be. And we had to drive 9 or 10 hours in one day, so we didn't have time to stop to see much along the way.
So you're just looking out your window. That's
Typically when I travel to foreign countries, I try not to drive unless there's like something I'm going, like some sort of experience that I would really miss out on if we didn't have a car. And then I always make my husband drive.
Well, then I guess it's good you bring them along then.
Yeah. But typically, I love taking transit. I love being able to see cities that way. I like exploring cities on the bus and the trams and the subways, and I don't know, makes me feel more like a local, I guess. So yeah, but that was the exception.
Yeah. All right. So going back to, first of all, have you ever figure skated before? Like, you spend all this time on the figure skating world. Have you ever figure skated?
So I did take a little tot class when I was 4. What I kind of remember about it is that it was cold and I fell down a lot. And my mom, in talking to some of the other parents in the lobby while I was in class, kind of got a little bit of an idea of how much figure skating costs if you're really going to do it. And she really wanted me to have a lot of different experiences and be able to try a lot of different things when I was little. So after I finished the class, she bought me ballet shoes and a pink tutu, and off I went to ballet class. And so I really never skated again. I started, that was when I think I was 4 at the time, 3 or 4. It was a couple years later that I kind of discovered figure skating on TV during the Olympics. And so I grew up watching figure skating all the time, but it just we didn't have a rink very close to where we lived. I mean, half an hour, but not like right in our town. And I didn't have any friends that skated really. And so it just didn't seem, I don't know. I don't think I ever asked to go back into skating lessons. I was really happy doing dance and music. I played piano, I played French horn, I was in choir.
Wow.
I played softball very badly, but for 3 or 4 years, I really stuck with it because I had friends on the team. I tried tennis. I was also bad at that. Ball sports, not my thing.
They're not my thing either.
Yeah. So and I still think about, I would really love to skate, but to learn how to skate now as an adult. There's such a thriving adult program in a lot of different places with figure skating, and it seems fun. And I love being around skating, and I know a lot about it. And I would love to be able to, I know all the jumps, I know all the spins, I know even like some of the turns if they're done slowly and I really think about it. Like I know there's a choctaw and the rumba, I know what that looks like. But I would really love to be able to understand, especially since I love ice dance, to understand the technical side even better than I do now. And I think I need to learn how to skate to be able to really understand that. So hopefully, but I'm traveling so much that it just seems,
Right.
I don't know, it seems hard to commit to a class. My 3-year-old daughter did her first couple of skating classes, and they even have an adult beginner class at the same time. But the adult class is an hour and the kids classes are half an hour. And I'm like, what am I going to do with my 3-year-old for the other half hour?
Well, how is she enjoying it? Is she enjoying the learn to skate session?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. She says she likes it. She gets excited when we talk about that Thursdays we have skating class. It's on like a break right now because we've got a lot of travel coming up. So we didn't sign her up for this session. But she's done maybe like 9 or 10 classes since the spring. And some days she's fine. And then when we went from the spring session to the summer session, her teacher changed, and but the other teacher was still there. And so she was very upset that she couldn't be in Coach April's class anymore. So, and she's very stubborn. So once she gets it in her head that she can't do something, or she can't stand up after she falls down because it's slippery and it's hard, and she's really tiny. She's on the very small side for a 3-year-old. So I just want her to be able to do it better than I can. If she's around skating a lot and if she sees it a lot, I want her to be able to feel like she can put on skates and get out there and have fun. Whether or not it's something she really wants to do a lot of, I don't know yet. But
yeah, just letting her know that she's still welcome on the ice. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And maybe someday we'll figure out my schedule and I'll get out there too.
Because I want to ask you about how you even started being a photographer in the first place, but then I want to ask you how do you even know these turns and steps? Because I mean, even I sometimes struggle with remembering them, so I can't even imagine not doing them and knowing what they are. So, but anyway, let's start with have you always liked photographing things, or where did that journey begin?
Yeah, it really began with skating for me. It was always, I mean, it was always tied together. When I was younger, I kind of, I had a camera. I took pictures when we went on vacations and stuff like that. But, it wasn't the same as it is now because it wasn't digital. Like my mom would give me one roll of film and then she would say, you have to pay to develop these pictures out of your allowance. So I was I was pretty careful about what I took pictures of. And I always kind of enjoyed taking pictures, but I never took a photography class in school. I was never in like the photo club. I was never interested in like learning how to develop my own film, or anything like that. And then when I was in college, it was the 2002 Olympics, which were intense with since they were in the US and they were the whole judging scandal with the pairs, and that kicked off the Olympics. There was and I was in college, and so for the first time I had access to an internet connection that was always on, no more dial-up. And so I was, I wanted to follow everything. I wanted to follow all the news. It was kind of the first time that I had the time to do that. And I met people on the internet that were also super into figure skating. I started meeting up with them at events. One of them, 20 years later, is still one of my best friends.
Oh, that's
And yeah, so I started going to events with groups of people, and it was one of them had like some sort of like semi, a nicer camera than a point and shoot. And she kind of taught me a few things. And then I was trying to get the most out of my point and shoot. I bought like a nicer point and shoot camera to try to take pictures at events. And it was still like, you'd take a picture and the picture's like this and the skater was like this. And then in 2007, I wanted to go to the Lake Placid Ice Dance Championships. The summer ice dance event in Lake Placid, because I was really starting to get into ice dance, and there were some people that I thought were going to compete there, and I'd always wanted to go to Lake Placid. I've been obsessed with the Olympics since I was a kid, and so I kind of priced it out, and I was like, oh, it's a lot of money. Hotels there are expensive, especially if you don't book it in advance. And then icedance.com, the website, posted that they were looking for volunteers to help them, because the event used to have like all of these rounds of the compulsory dances, like compulsory dance after compulsory dance after compulsory dance. The whole event was like 5 days long. It was on 2 rinks. And so they were basically said, we'll bring extra gear. We'll teach you how to use it. If you just have to volunteer a few hours of your time to take some photos, and we'll post them on our website. And I thought that sounded super fun. And it also kind of justified my trip that I wanted to go on anyway. And it was just, not to be too punny, but it just clicked. Like the second I got behind this ginormous camera with a huge lens attached, I had never handled anything like that before. And they told me how to focus it, and I looked through it, and I felt like I knew what to do, without much practice at all. Looking back, obviously I needed a lot of practice, but it just felt like all of a sudden, and I, like what you were saying at the beginning, like all of a sudden I found a way that I could contribute to the sport that I loved without actually being on skates.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's
and then from there, I went home, I purchased my own camera, a used camera, a refurbished lens. The women that ran icedance.com kind of took me on as a full-time volunteer, basically said, when you want to go photograph something, we'll help you get credentials. And and I still work with them. It's been 15 years, and I'm going to Lake Placid again in 2 weeks. So
fun.
Yeah.
So after that first Lake Placid competition where you were volunteering, did it all just kind of fall into place after that? That kind of sounds what you're saying. Like what
well,
was
as far as like doing it for a hobby, it did. I didn't really, like, I worked 3 or 4 different jobs a lot of the time. I graduated from college in the middle of the recession. I thought I was going to work in publishing. I have an English major. I went to grad school for creative writing, and then the publishing industry kind of imploded. There's a lot we could say about all of that. But so that I ended up, while I was in grad school, I was working in a store in Chicago. I did that for a while. And then I ended up working for a photography company that did school photos. So like the yearbook photos. So I did that, but then they also, in addition to doing the yearbook portraits, they, if you had your own gear and some experience, they would send you to do events at the schools throughout the years. And so since I had experience with sports, I got on the sports photography team with them, and I got to cover all kinds of different high school sports.
Wow.
Got a lot of experience. and was finally able to make some money from photography. Then I did senior portraits, which was really great because I learned a lot about how to pose people, how to interact with people, how to make people of all different body types look great on camera.
All right, I want to know more about that because I'm not posing at all. So
all the angles.
Is that just like, how do you even learn how to pose?
I was lucky that I had this opportunity to be on the senior portrait team because they brought in a very experienced photographer, but also someone who was really good at teaching too. A lot of times I think photographers are, they're artists. They're not necessarily educators. But he had like all these like sheets, like this is a good example of a pose. Here's 4 bad examples. And then he'd be like, don't put their hand here. Don't, just like little things, like the classic, like one of these for senior portraits, right? A lot of people do this. And then it looks like you're like punching yourself in the face, right? And it feels natural. Like you don't think about it if you're just doing that, but you have to be able to, how do you tell the kid, especially if it's a girl, to like turn their hand,
right,
lean this way, right? This looks a lot like, and also a lot of times your hand is lighter than your face too. So if you take a picture of this, your eye is drawn to the hand because it's like a big, flat, bright part of the picture. It detracts from the face. So you want to move it back. It might not feel very comfortable.
Yeah, but that's such a subtle thing. And that's the same in figure skating where you have all these little movements you might have with your feet or your hands or your coach is telling you to turn your body a certain way, and you might not think it's important, but you go back and look at the pictures or the video and you think, wow, like that where you put your hands actually does matter.
Yeah, it's all about the details. And that's one of the things I love being able to provide as a photographer too, is that we always tell coaches that stop by our table at events, like even if they're coaching beginners, like feel free to bring your students over and stand there and look at your students' pictures with them, because then you can say like, when I tell you to point your toe and you don't point it, this is how it works. So, and yeah, I think it is obviously some things you really need video for some things to be able to see your speed and your flow and like transitions and stuff like that. But like some of the small details, they come across, it's easier to see them in photos because you can really freeze a moment. That's why I take so many.
Well, I'm grateful you take so many. You took photos of me at the last national showcase competition, and it was just a joy to look back and see those photos. And I'm just so glad that I bought them, and it was just great. All right, so I want to know, how is it just the fact that you watched figure skating for so long and you photographed it for so long? Is that how you know all the turns and spins and jumps? How did you learn that?
I'm just kind of nerdy, and I just wanted to understand it more. I wanted to understand, the scores and the judging and why my favorite skater might not do as well compared to someone who's not my favorite. So when I was younger, I think the spins are pretty easy to master. Like you can get that from just like watching TV, and they identify, like that's,
Right.
that's their layback spin. And then you're like, oh, it's laid back because they're laid back.
Or
not all of them are
they're
easy,
sitting down, that makes sense.
But for jumps, I had a friend that skated when she was young, and I remember we were at a competition, and I said, will you just tell me the difference between the jumps? And so she kind of showed me the pattern. Some of them are, I remember like, flip and lets are kind of hard, but it's a lot of times it's about the entry pattern. And so she kind of pointed out that a lot of times the lets is the long entry coming down the ice. You don't have to do it that way, but like 90% of people do. But then with turns and stuff, that was because I was interested in ice dance, and especially once the international judging system came out, and it really like the difference between a level 4 footwork and a level 2 footwork would make the difference between who won. And I really wanted to try to understand that better, or like as on the compulsories too, the key points. With that, that's really hard for me to get. But sometimes in Lake Placid, I grab an ice dancer or a coach and have them like while the competition is going on or while people are practicing, and I'll have them like point out which steps are the key points. And I know the steps pretty well. I know what they look like because over the years, when you photograph the compulsory dances, you know where the good photos are. Like I know where to stand or where I prefer to stand. I don't always get to pick, but if I get to pick my spot for a compulsory dance or a pattern now, I know I hate standing on the right side for the 14 step. I would much rather stand on the left side, just because you get better pictures from there. So yeah, so I would, that kind of, I think that's really hard to understand without having like the frame of reference of being able to do it. And it's also really hard. I work for icedance.com. Most of what I do is photography now for them, but I used to do more writing. And it's hard to write an article about a competition, especially, a very hotly contested event, like back in the Tessa and Scott versus Meryl and Charlie years when they were kind of going back and forth. A lot of times it came down to a level, and it's really hard because you have very passionate fans that are saying there's no way they should have lost, or there's no way the other team should have won. And so sometimes I really wanted to kind of dig in and try to see if I could figure out how to explain it. I don't think I was always successful, but a couple of times I remember watching the same footwork over and over again. And then I was like, oh, there it is. That's where she lost the edge. That's where they lost the level.
Wow.
Right.
Well, that is so impressive that, you can, I still have trouble, deciphering all of the things. So I'm just so impressed that you're able to do it without skating. And I hope that, soon one day you might be able to join an adult class, because I just think that would be so interested to, in a few years come back and hear your experience of what it was like to, learn how to ice skate, knowing all of the stuff.
Right.
Just learning it.
I think I would be very hard on myself.
Oh, yeah. I understand.
But,
yeah. So tell us what it was like because you photographed for the past Olympics, right? So tell us what that was like.
It was, for someone that I followed the Olympics so closely, every Olympics, winter and summer, but the first Olympics I remember watching were the 1992 Winter Olympics. And when I was younger, I would this is before the internet. I would watch the Olympics and I would fill up notebooks. I would take notes because I wanted to remember who won all of the medals. And I would keep my own chart of the medal counts, which countries won which medals. I was an only child, can you tell? But so going to an Olympics was a dream of mine for the whole time I was growing up. And then in 2010, I was able to go with some friends as a spectator. And at that point, I had started doing some photography, but I didn't have any idea then how you could get credentialed to photograph at the Olympics. I think I I probably imagine that it was some sort of like almost like a contest. Like you had to like submit a portfolio and get approved, because I couldn't imagine that they would just let anyone walk in there. But I remember going downtown in Vancouver and taking a picture of the main press center, um, and being, thinking like someday I'm going to figure out how to get there. And so the next one, 2014, was, by that time I'd been around a little bit. I had some colleagues that I knew personally that were trying to go to Sochi. But just financially, it wasn't possible for me unless I found someone that would hire me to go. And I had no idea how to do that either. So I just kind of let that one go. I didn't really think about it. And then in 2018, by that point, I had met my husband. We got married in 2016. He really took on this dream as his own too. So he was determined that we were going to save enough money and go to the 2018 Olympics. And I started getting organized, because one thing, you have to apply, or your media organization, not the individual person, but the media organization has to apply for a credential for the Olympics about a year and a half out.
Oh, wow.
So in 2014, I kind of like knew that it was really early, but like I didn't even know, like even if I thought I could go, I wasn't organized a year and a half out. I had no idea. But then by the time 2018 rolled around, so I was expecting to start the application process on behalf of icedance.com in summer of 2016. And so I went to there's different ways that you can get a media credential for the Olympics. I'm not an expert, but the way that I had researched and knew to do it was through your National Olympic Committee. And so you have to go through, if you're an American, you have to go through the US Olympic Committee. So on their website, they have a media section. And so in summer 2016, I bookmarked the page that said that the application process for the 2018 Olympics will start later this year. And so I bookmarked it. I don't know, maybe like May 2016. And I would go to that bookmark and refresh the page like every couple of days. And my husband is very, when he like gets an idea in his head, like it's there for a long time. And so he does not let things go. So he would remind me all the time. He'd be like, did you check for credentials? Did you check? And so I really did. I checked all the time. And then it was fall. So it was probably like October. And I found out that the window had already opened and closed without me knowing about it, because they redesigned their website that summer, but they never like took the old pages down.
Oh,
so
no.
If I had just gone to the US Olympic Committee like main website and clicked on media, it would have taken me to a new page. But because I was using a bookmark, I had bookmarked the old page, which still existed but was never updated. So yeah, so I totally missed out on 2018. It was devastating. And but my husband was determined. He was like, well, now this gives us even more time to save for it and to plan for it. Well, also in 2018, I had a baby. So, I was thinking that things were going to change. It might not be as easy for me to go, but when the application process opened for the 2022 Olympics, it was in 2020. Everything was crazy. I didn't have any work for over a year, close to a year and a half. I was home with our toddler, but And so we didn't know for sure what things would look like in 2022, but we kind of my husband and I decided, and then also Daphne from who runs icestance.com, we talked about it, and she was like, well, let's apply. So it's even a possibility. Like when you apply, it's not like you have to like pay for it or put down a deposit or anything like that. So although the housing deposits come pretty quickly after that. But yeah, so we applied in, I think, fall 2020. It was a little delayed that year, so it was a bit later. And then I think it was like March or April of 2021, we found out that we'd been approved for a credential.
Was that just a moment of joy?
Yeah. I felt like I made the Olympic team. Like,
I'm sure.
except I didn't get to have my moment in the kiss and cry like the athletes that make the team do. But yeah, and it was from there. It was just we started planning right away. But the reality is that when most of the people that cover figure skating all the time, like the smaller media outlets, the people that are really dedicated to skating, the people that have their own websites, a lot of those people are volunteers. So like for me, it kind of all folds into part of my business. But when I go to a major event like that, I don't make all of my expenses back. And like, there's not really just the way that things are set up now. Most newspapers, most magazines and stuff, they purchase photos from agencies. They have contracts with different agencies like Getty Images or Reuters, or very few of them even send their own photographers anymore. Or if they do send someone to an event, they use local people. They don't necessarily cover the costs of expenses and stuff like that anymore. So for people, and I'm sure it's the same in other niche sports as well, for people that are really passionate about a particular sport, it's a lot of people just do it because they love it. And I'm really thankful that I was able to have that opportunity. I crowdfunded some of the expense. I had it all worked out that I was going to use points for my flight, but because China was still closed essentially to international travel when the Olympics happened, my flight was canceled. Like there wasn't a way to get into China on that flight that I had originally booked like 9-10 months in advance on points.
So how did that work?
Oh my gosh. So they had what they called temporary flights that were like we had to show our Olympic credential, which was mailed to our house before we, which is not typical. Most other events you go to, you pick up your credential when you get there. But for the Olympics, it also acts as a visa into the country.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't have to get a visa for China. And that's typical of an Olympics, like for people that went to South Korea and Russia for the last couple of Olympics. So, but you had to show, and they had to scan your Olympic credential to get on these flights. They were also not commercially available. So I couldn't just go to a website and book a flight. And you either had to call the airlines in order to book these flights, and then you had to convince someone over the phone that you were actually authorized to be on one of these flights. And of course, the person that you call, like customer service at the airline, doesn't have any idea. They're like, no, there's no flights to China. It's closed. And you're like, no, I'm special.
Wow.
So it was a really difficult process for anyone that was going on their own. And even though my credential was through the US Olympic Committee, I didn't have very much support because they were taking care of the Olympic team and their support staff and things like that. So they were kind of like, here's the chart with all these flights on it. You can just book one of these flights. And we're like, okay, but how? So what I did was a friend of mine who had a friend that worked for the Canadian Olympic Committee, um, said, hey, this travel agency is booking all of the stuff for the Canadian Olympic team. Maybe they can help you too. And so she called them and they were like, oh yeah, we know how to do this. Well, and she's like, okay, but I'm not on the Canadian Olympic team. Like and they're like, no, but if you have an Olympic credential, if you can give us your number, we can book the flight. And so once she realized they were going to be able to help her, she was like, hey, I have a friend that's American. Can you help her too? And so they did. So this Canadian travel agency in Montreal got me to the Olympics.
Oh,
I do not think I would have been able to do it by myself.
oh, well, I'm grateful for that because I'm just so glad you had that experience.
Yeah, and once I was there, it was so great. I think people that had been to multiple Olympics where there were definitely, because there were restrictions, we were only allowed to be at venues, at the main press center, and at media hotels. And then on the buses that went between those. And so there was a pretty extensive, sometimes complicated shuttle system. Sometimes really great, sometimes not. And so we spent a lot of time like waiting for buses, and you couldn't really move freely even between venues unless they actually had their own like taxi service, like Olympic taxis. They're very expensive. I never took one. But people that worked for agencies that had to get quickly between venues, sometimes that was the only way, like if they were assigned to cover a lot of events on the same day. But so that part was difficult. The food was difficult because the only cafeteria for us was at the main press center, which was 30 to 45 minutes from the figure skating venue. And some of the other events like if you go to a night of short track speed skating, it's over in like, I don't know, 2 to 3 hours. Like we went to the big air snowboarding and the entire final was done in an hour. Like, but skating events are like 6 hours.
Right.
So when we went to the rink for a skating event, we were typically there for 7 to 8 hours. And there was like a snack bar at the rink that we could access, but it was always super crowded. And the food options were pretty limited. So that was, the food, and the cafeteria kind of served the same things over and over again. But beyond, so I think people that had been to a lot of Olympics before were like kind of saw this Olympics as a bummer, in a lot of ways. But I was so excited to be there. I was so excited to see the Olympic rings everywhere and to feel like I was finally a part of something that I'd been dreaming about since I was a young girl. And then also to see so many great moments.
Tell us about some of those great moments.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry. Siri is trying to get in on the interview. Yeah, so I love ice dance. I've been, well, first of all, everyone that came up in the US or Canadian system, so all the Team USA and Team Canada athletes, and then the ones that competed for other countries but that grew up in the system, were people that I'd been photographing since they were young. And then especially for the ice dancers, it was people that I like knew personally, like not I'm not like best friends with anyone, but people like, people that I know them, I know their families, I know their parents, I know their siblings. So it was just really special to be in that arena and to see them, most of them skated very well. So the free dance was probably my favorite day, incredibly emotional. But it was, I just felt so lucky to be able to be there, and also a little guilty because for most of them, they're, almost all of the athletes, none of their family members were there. There were a couple of athletes who had like a parent as a coach. And especially since I'm a mom now too, I kept thinking of all the parents at home and how devastating it would be to have your kid make an Olympic team and to not be able to go. But yeah, that was so incredible. The team event was so fun. I know among passionate skating fans, some people find the team event to be a little cheesy, and it is, but it's super fun. And I don't think you'll hear too many complaints from the athletes that get to be a part of it either. I mean, I think a lot of athletes wish it was at the end instead of the beginning. But how they put up those like little boxes where the whole team can sit, and then the whole team goes to the kiss and cry to cheer with that. Like, I think in some ways, I understand the argument that some people want it after the event because they feel like it, like the main events, because they feel like it impacts the preparation of people, especially for whichever event goes first, which this year was men. But it's a nice way to get started too, because the Olympics are such a nervy, like huge mental thing. And I think having that, like, it's a much lower stress way to start with the Olympics. And then being able to be there to see Nathan Chen like skate so well and fulfill the goal that he's had since his 4 years ago when he didn't have a great Olympics, and especially to see him like struggle in practice and then pull it all out for the actual competition. That was really, really great too.
And it must be
it was
different, actually be in the room when it happens, because obviously we're watching it on the internet or on, our TVs, and, we're cheering along with them, but it must just be different to just be there.
Yeah, it felt, like I have my own stress of being there because it's also like while it's a once in a lifetime opportunity for the athletes, it is for me too, and I don't want to screw anything up. So it was it is like I'm very focused in the moment, but then like at the end of an event, especially when I'm sitting there like going through my photos really quickly, trying to get out a couple of really good photos from each event, like in a timely manner instead of 6 months later. And being able to like go back through my photos, and then it really hits you like that I got to be there. I got to see that. So it's just
so cool.
It was an incredible experience, and I just feel so lucky that I was able to do that, and I hope I'll get to do more.
I hope so.
Not to be greedy, but it is funny, like when you meet other people at the Olympics, like other media people, it's either like oh, it's my first one too, or they're like, oh, it's my 20th. Like people that it's a really hard event. It's hard for people with families to be away from families for so long. It's long, it's grueling, the days, and especially if, oh my gosh, the people that photograph the outdoor sports, it's really hard on your body too. I didn't even go up to the mountains because it was kind of a long round trip, but but I also realized, I thought about doing it one day, and then I realized I didn't bring I don't have snow pants. I don't have steel-toed boots. I didn't even have like gloves beyond like my Olympic mittens. So you definitely, like the people that do that, they have They have different gear. They have a whole other set of concerns. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's cold inside, although in major arenas, it's typically not as cold as it is in like a community rink. So I really didn't freeze very much at the Olympics the way that I do in.
Well, that's good because I
next
guess
month.
you still need to be able to, move your fingers and your body to be able to take good pictures. Well,
yeah, at the end of a day, sometimes like you look at your hand and you're like, this feels kind of like I can't really move my finger.
Okay, do you have to do like certain stretches and stuff? Well, I mean, I'm not a photographer at all, but to like warm up your fingers or
I probably should do more like strengthening exercises. Where it really hurts is like in your shoulders because you're pulling your whole body forward and it's easy to like slump like into your camera. I use a monopod, which takes the weight off of the it's like a tripod, but it just has one leg. And that way I can move back and forth and follow the action more easily. But yeah, when I use a longer lens, you can't hand hold it especially because a senior skating program is 4 minutes long. It wouldn't be a long time to be holding. I'm not good with like estimates, but I would estimate like it's like, I don't know, 15 to 20 pounds. Like if you're using a really long lens. And so holding it like this in front of you and also being able to, well, it just wouldn't work. So you put a monopod, it usually attaches to the lens.
not to the actual
kind of balance. So if you attach it to the camera, you can't switch to vertical. And I shoot vertical a lot because people are vertical. I shoot ice dance a lot horizontal, but not all. It depends on what they're doing. And then pairs, you're constantly going back and forth in pairs because a death spiral is shaped like this, but lifts are shaped like this. So yeah.
So how
you put it on it attaches to the lens, but it's inside of a ring, so the lens can rotate inside.
All right. So I guess that kind of goes into your knowledge of the turns and jumps and spins. You have to know like which way to orient your camera. So you have to know. I've never.
Yeah, so I remember one year in I think it was 2014. It was an Olympic year for sure. I was at Canadian Nationals. And it was during the parents event, and I was constantly, switching back and forth. And the woman next to me was a hockey photographer. And especially in an Olympic year, you get a lot more coverage at nationals because it's the Olympic trials, and so you get a lot of people who don't know skating very well. And I love helping people. Like I love to take aside the newspaper photographers and like sometimes I'll mark like don't miss these skaters. Like a lot of times it's the last group, but in the short program sometimes you have like higher level skaters skating in group 1 or group 2. Or even if someone doesn't do well in the short, I'm like, don't miss this one because they might come back. But so this woman was sitting next to me and we'd probably been chatting before. And I just remember between two of the pairs programs, she was like, so how do you know when he's gonna launch her up or when he's gonna launch her across? And I was like, okay, she's asking the difference between a twist and a throw. And I was like, well, I'm like, the twist is usually the first element, but not always. Or I guess I would like lifts too. And I was like, if you want me to say it out loud, like up or across, I'll say it when they start like prepping for an event. Cause you do. And after a few teams, she kind of got it. Not, maybe not perfectly, but she kind of started to recognize the patterns.
So for people who are maybe wanting to become figure skating photographers or anything on that level, what would you recommend where do they start?
It is, honestly, I feel like I had an easier time 15 years ago when I started, because now a lot of more people have access to higher end cameras now. And so more, like when I started, you could just bring a camera to nationals and you could just photograph, as long as like you couldn't bring a super, super long lens or a monopod, but you could bring like a decent lens, a decent lens and a decent camera. It's probably about, like, it sticks out this far in front of me. It's not so you can hold it. If you're really getting started and just kind of doing it for fun, a lot of times you take a few pictures and you look, you might watch some of the skating, you might only take photographs during practice or during warm-ups. And they used to let people do that. And now a lot of times there's rules against it in arenas. They don't allow detachable lenses. So it is really hard to get started. You also, unless you have like a kid who skates, I do see a lot of parents who have kids that skate. They might ask their kid's coach, like, hey, can I come in and take some pictures of my kid practicing? And I think as long as you have the permission of the coach and the rink, I think that's great. But if you're just like someone off the street and you call up a rink and you're like, hey, can I come take some pictures of kids skating? I don't think they're necessarily going to let you in. So I think it is hard to get started. I have people that message me sometimes on Instagram or send me an email and kind of ask for some tips on settings and stuff. So a lot of times at competitions, I'll have parents who bring their own cameras and they come over and sometimes they'll ask, like, what settings should I put my camera? And I'm always happy to help. I think it's so, for me, it brings me so much joy to be able to capture a moment and to especially to like make an athlete look so, like, make an athlete see the best of themselves too, is what I always want to do in taking pictures. Yeah, I take pictures of your jump and you might have an awkward face in your jump, but like, look at your body position. Look at how high off the ice you are. Look at what you can do. Honestly, like, even like beginners, like, I'm like, you can do a single toe loop. That is insane. Like, do you know how much work that takes? Like, and you've mastered that. So yeah, so I love being able to share that with people, the joy of being able to capture a moment. But I think it's probably more accessible if you're interested in shooting sports into starting with like outdoor sports. I think it's probably like and not professional too, because professional sports are always going to are never going to let you bring your camera in. But like trying to find some amateur sports in your town, high school, and also I'm always looking to hire photographers. So if you really want to get started, shoot me an email.
So how can they find your email or message you on Instagram?
Yeah, so I'm M Heaney Photo, MHEANEY Photo, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And I don't post a lot on Twitter, but I do Instagram and Facebook more often, and I post both events or photos from smaller events that I do, non-famous skaters, but people that I'm able to capture at events. And also I try to post some from big events as well. So if you're interested in seeing a little more of what I do, you can follow me. And if you want to figure out how to get started, if we're ever in the same place, I would love to show people.
Well, awesome.
I mean, that's how I got started. I had the amazing chance to work with a couple of professional photographers that knew way more than I did and offered advice freely for years, honestly.
So tell us about the events that you have coming up, because I hear you're pretty busy for the next month.
I am. I'm so excited. I've had a few weeks off. So I'm all caught up, which is amazing. On Saturday, the 16th, I go to Sun Valley. I will be photographing their summer competition, which I think is like the 19th to the 24th, something like that. Sun Valley, for those that don't know, has the only year-round outdoor ice rink in the world. So it's so much fun to photograph on the outdoor ice. On the Sunday of the competition, they run, actually Saturday and Sunday of the competition, they run some of the events outdoors, which is great that like just totally normal skating athletes, all levels get to skate, get to compete on that ice. And then they have a Saturday night ice show. They have a company that is there for the summer that puts on the show, and then they have rotating headliners. So on the 16th, they have Nathan Chen. And on the 23rd, they have Ashley Kane and Timothy LeDuc, I believe. Yeah. So I'll get to photograph those. And then there's also this event called Pro Skaters Live. Pro Skaters, I think it's proskaters.org, I think, is an organization that helps both casting directors that want to put on shows find professional skaters to hire. And then it also helps professional skaters that want to be in these shows find jobs. So they do a couple of events each year that are things like live auditions and seminars, teaching people about performing and stuff, because it is very different than competing. And if you come from a rink with a strong showcase background, you probably have a lot of those skills already, but not all rinks really focus on that. So I'm photographing they have a live competition. It's kind of like American Idol theme. They have judges and they hold up scores on little paddles at the end. It's super fun. So I'm doing that. And then we fly back from Sun Valley, and then the next day we drive to Lake Placid for the Ice Dance Championships. That one is super fun because I've done it, since 2007. I did miss a couple of years recently, so I haven't been there since 2018. And then in addition to doing the on ice photography, I'm not the vendor at that one. I'm just covering it for icedance.com. They have their own vendor in Lake Placid. But then we also do off ice photo shoots, because the skaters that qualify for nationals have to submit headshots, or I think even to just be a part of the competitive series. I don't know how they're doing it this year because this year's different. But typically, if you register for sectionals, which most of the ice dancers used to at least make it to sectionals, you had to provide a headshot. And for single skaters, especially the younger kids, they have like a yearbook photo or something. But for ice dancers, you don't necessarily have a nice shot of you and your partner. So we started doing this from icedance.com. Our team, we started doing this in 2008, I think 2008 or 9, to help us pay for the cost of getting to Lake Placid and staying there, because it's a resort town, so it's expensive. And yeah, so that's been super fun too, because a lot of times we get to see the kids like really grow up throughout the years. Yeah, so we're gonna do it's fun to do off ice portrait work too, because I don't have a lot of time to do that otherwise. And it's such a beautiful setting. We have like certain locations that we use. And then I come back from Lake Placid, and then it's National Showcase, which is again such an amazing event. Last year was my first National Showcase. And
oh wow, I didn't know that. It was my first National Showcase too. So
it's so great. It's such a positive, like creative environment. It's so obviously it's a competition. People want to win, but it's not, there's not as much stress.
Right.
You don't have to throw your hardest jumps in your program. So most people do technical content that they're a lot more comfortable doing successfully. And as a result, you have a lot of people skate really well. And the way that it's set up, like with only the winner from each event goes to the Parade of Champions anyway. So like, obviously, people want to win, people want to skate in the Parade of Champions. It's super fun, but it's such a small amount that do get to skate in that I think, of course it can be devastating for someone who like really, really, really hoped to, and then maybe didn't have their best skate, or maybe had made it the year before, but then didn't make it this year. But it seems like it's less pressure. Like if you make it, great, but if you don't, like, it's still super fun to be there with your teammates and to skate your events. There's team events too, which are super fun. I think it provides just some less cutthroat environment.
I agree. That has been my experience too. And then so you're doing something after National Showcase?
Yeah. So then I go to Hershey Open in Pennsylvania. Never done that one before. They found us last year at National Showcase, actually. So they invited us to come to that event this year. And then we're in the DC area for Potomac Open.
Wow.
We're in Houston, Labor Day weekend. And then skate St. Moritz in Oakland, which is, we used to live in Oakland, California. So that's like going back to our home.
That would be lovely.
I think. Yeah.
Well,
and then after that, I don't know what I'm doing as far as like international events. This year I might go to Skate Canada. It's drivable for me. It's in Mississauga, Ontario, which is just outside Toronto. It's about a 4-hour drive for me. So that one it seems likely as long as I don't have a conflict.
Well, that sounds like a busy schedule.
Yeah. I was hoping to go to 4 continents in Australia, but they just changed the venue because they weren't able to find a venue in Australia that was available. So it's going to be in the US. So I still might go to 4 continents next year, but
well, I'll have my
that trip to Australia
for that one. That will be a fun trip. Well, Melanie, I have one last question for you. Who do you know that I should interview next?
Oh my goodness. Well, I can definitely point you in the direction of any media people. I have a bunch of people that I work with regularly that are all fascinating and love the sport so much. So maybe one of them, or maybe I'll chat with someone in Sun Valley who's a performer in one of their shows who might be interested next week.
All right. Well, I'll get Anna to reach out to you and work that out. But Melanie, it's just been so good to talk to you today. I'm just so grateful just to know more about what photography is like in figure skating, and your just awesome gift of being able to follow it and your passion for it. And I can't wait to see you at the National Showcase competition. And I just wish you the best in your next month of craziness.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, I'll see you later.
Okay, bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of On the Ice with Bernice. On today's episode, we talked with Melanie Heaney about her journey in the figure skating world, how figure skating photography works, and we learned about some really fun adventures that she has been able to have. Would you do me a favor? Would you mind liking and commenting and subscribing to my podcast? And if you're feeling really generous, would you share an episode of my podcast on social media? This really helps podcasts like me get started. This episode was researched and produced by Anna Blankenship and hosted by me, Bernice. Most importantly, remember, everyone is welcome on the ice.